everyone, welcome back to Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. Today I'm at the House of Web3 and I'm interviewing Tegan Kline in person in San Francisco. So super excited for this. Hi, Tegan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, Tegan, before we get started, can you tell our listeners about yourself, your background, who you are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Tegan Kline. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Edge and Node. We're the initial team behind the graph. Similar to what Google does for the web, we do that for the blockchain space and organizing data so you can easily access it. And my background, I actually started in traditional finance. So I was on Wall Street for about half a decade. I started at Bank of America in the financial institutions group in investment banking, and then I moved to sales and trading at Barclays. And then I joined the Web3 space full time before it was even called Web3.
Right, I know. When did Web3 become a term, actually?
Right. Well, I think technically Gavin Wood coined the term. And then Juan from Protocol Labs, he really went with Web3, but I feel like it really exploded more recently, like in the last, 2-3 years.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to break that down a little bit. Maybe before we break that down, tell our listeners how you got involved in the Web3 space.
Absolutely. Yes. I got into Web3 before it was called Web3. So I actually learned about Bitcoin in 2011. And I chose to kind of go a traditional Wall Street path. So having planted the seed with Bitcoin, went into Wall Street, investment banking, sales and trading. I was on Wall Street for about half a decade. So I kind of saw some of the inefficiencies and then also a little bit of kind of the unfair, maybe it is just inefficiencies. Let's go with that because there's a lot of middlemen involved in finance in the traditional space. And when I learned about Ethereum, that's really when I went deep into the crypto rabbit hole, if you will. And I saw the opportunity to kind of remove those middlemen and make it a lot more efficient, but also a lot more fair and equitable.
So what year was it that you found out about Ethereum?
It was 2016, I believe, and I was on the sales and trading floor at Barclays in San Francisco.
Wow.
And so I actually left Wall Street to join crypto full time. I joined a startup. I joined Orchid, which is backed by Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia. I helped them launch. And then I joined the graph ecosystem. What was it? Oh, man. I joined the graph ecosystem about 4 years ago now, so maybe 2019.
Okay, and so the graph that is what Edge and Node came out of. Was it the graph?
Yeah, exactly.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah, back in the day, so decentralization, it very much is a journey. So back in the day when we were building the graph, there was a team of about 14 of us when we launched the Graph Network. And so with the launch of the Graph Network, Edge and Node, or the Graph team, rebranded to Edge and Node, and the foundation also was created separately. And so two entities were formed before that launch. And now, fast forward to today, there's actually 6 different core developer teams. So 6 different companies that are full-time focused on the graph. So it's no longer just Edge and Node and the Graph Foundation. There's many other companies, including Mazzari.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I also want to know a little bit about this because we're actually filming today at the House of Web3 in San Francisco. So when was the House of Web3 established and why did you decide to create it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the House of Web3 was co-founded by Yaniv, myself, and Noelle. It was actually Noelle's idea long before she joined the graph ecosystem. And we wanted a place where people could come and have community together, network, but also a place to make Web3 a little bit more accessible. I think a lot of people are afraid of crypto, or they have these misconceptions about crypto, or they think it's just people trading tokens. And really there's communities, there's technology underneath all of these different tokens. So we created the House of Web3 during the height of the pandemic, basically when everyone was super bearish on San Francisco. Everyone was fleeing this city. People said San Francisco is dead. And we're like, you know what? We're going to double down on San Francisco. San Francisco is not dead. It will never die. It has this kind of startup mentality, but also just experimental nature to it that I don't think you get in many other cities around the world. And so that is where the House of Web3 was born. And I hope to see many House of Web3s in other cities across the world.
Cool. That would be awesome.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it's interesting about San Francisco because I was one of the people that also fled during the pandemic to Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm back in San Francisco, I just see that it really is making a comeback and everybody seems to be back now. So it's one of those cities where it's like, I just feel like it could never actually be irrelevant or like never be a place of innovation.
Totally. I feel like so many people are coming back to San Francisco. And I actually started a group with Jane Lippincott of Andreessen Horowitz during a similar time called SF Crypto. And it's for anyone who's full-time in crypto and full-time living in San Francisco. And the group is almost 600 people now. We had an event last night at the House of Web3. Over 300 people came. So the city is thriving.
Yeah, that's impressive. So let's back up a little bit. You were in traditional finance. You were at Barclays.
Yeah, Barclays and Bank of America.
Got it. And you noticed inefficiencies. And then you found out about Ethereum, and maybe you started realizing that, I guess, through decentralization, these inefficiencies could be solved. Can you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So an investment bank really just kind of sits in the middle of two transactions, and you help to make those transactions go through. So when I was at Bank of America, that was a lot of mergers and acquisitions and helping companies go public. And the bank is paid a lot of money for those transactions. In sales and trading, you're helping people buy and sell different assets. I was in fixed income, but some people buy and sell stocks. And you're really just this person in the middle between these two trades. And so with decentralized finance, with Ethereum, with using these smart contracts, you're able to just execute a trade without anything needing to be in the middle. And that also empowers both sides of that transaction, of that trade. And I think that Ethereum really exploded the opportunity beyond just finance, beyond just money, to really any different asset class. And we saw that with the rise of NFTs, changing and disrupting the art marketplace, which I think is really exciting, but that's only kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Got it. And so let's talk a little bit about edge and node and the graph. And maybe should we talk about the graph first?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what the graph is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know things get confusing in crypto because they're all of these different entities and these different names, but really the graph is technology, just like Bitcoin, just like Ethereum. The graph is the technology. And the graph, what it does, it's kind of like what I said, similar to what Google does for the web, the graph does for the blockchain space. So with Google, they organize and they index data so that you can easily access that data. So the graph does that for the Web3 space. There's all this data on different blockchains. The graph supports over 40 different blockchains today, layer ones, layer twos, side chains, you name it. And there's this data that exists on these blockchains, but it's not organized. It's mass chaos. And so developers have a hard time getting that data off the blockchain in an organized way. So the graph, it abstracts that away for the developers so that they can just focus on building really amazing applications. Like Uniswap, for example, they leverage the graph's technology so that they can just build really amazing technology, a decentralized exchange. And so the graph helps them access data like trade data, as an example. All of their analytics is built using the graph.
And so when they build products, can you give examples of those use cases? Like what do they do with that data? I know you mentioned Uniswap, but can you maybe go deeper into that?
Totally. Yeah. So for example, with Uniswap, it's their analytics page. So if you go and you see, all of the different tokens, the price of those tokens, where they've traded, the historical data. So going back from the very beginning of the Ethereum blockchain, you can access all of that data. There's also examples in the NFT space. So Art Blocks is on the Graph's decentralized network today, and that's an NFT marketplace. And so to be able to see, what collection, who has what collection, how much are those NFTs worth, what's the historical value of those NFTs, how is that traded? Maybe there's, you can see how many are in the collection today, how many have been sold. So all of that data is pulled via the graph. And we're just the infrastructure behind these different applications. Really, the applications are kind of like the heroes within the graph ecosystem. And we're just there to enable entrepreneurship and development in Web3. And so there's thousands of applications that build using the graph today.
Got it. How is data pulled from the graph? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the indexers, so there's over 200 indexers today. So these are Google-like companies that are accessing data from the blockchain, and they're organizing that data. So they each indexer gets to choose which subgraph, which is like an application, that they want to organize data for and serve queries for. So for example, for Art Blocks, you, as an indexer, you sync that subgraph, and then you organize that data. And then anytime anyone searches anything on Art Blocks, the indexers are serving those queries, and they're all competing to get the best price, serve the queries quickly. And so it's really efficient because there are so many different companies that are there helping to serve those applications in a fast and cheap way.
Right, as opposed to just one centralized company.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
Okay. And now Edge and Node, which was spun off from the Graph, what is Edge and Node doing?
Yeah, so Edge and Node, we're a core developer within the Graph ecosystem. One of the big opportunities is we're working, when we first launched the Graph, we had the hosted service. And the hosted service is our hosted version, so kind of a centralized version of the Graph. We enabled subgraphs, which are open APIs. We worked with a handful of developers initially, and then that hosted service exploded. So that's where a lot of the volume and traffic is today. But now that the decentralized network is thriving, we're seeing great quality of service, we're seeing great latency. The network is ready for all of the subgraphs that are on the hosted service to upgrade to that decentralized network for query volumes to grow on the network. And so that's a really big opportunity that we're focused on today, and helping people upgrade to the decentralized network.
Got it. Now, before this interview, you mentioned something about sunrise of decentralized data. Did I get that right?
Yes, you
Because
got
this
it
was a new
right.
term for me. I was like, wait a minute, sunrise. I actually, and then I looked it up and I noticed that there was a whole blog post about this on the Graph or the Edge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so can you explain what that means?
Absolutely, yeah. So sunrise of decentralized data, this is that process of upgrading those applications from the hosted service to the decentralized network. So sunrise it was one of the big initiatives that I launched once I became CEO, once I was appointed CEO. And it's really about upgrading those subgraphs to the decentralized network. We started the first phase of the sunrise, which is super exciting. We went live with an upgrade indexer on the network. So that's the hosted service upgrading to the network. This way, the applications, they don't need to wait for the indexers to sync their subgraphs. Sometimes it takes a couple days, sometimes it takes a week for those subgraphs to sync. And now with the upgrade indexer, you can just put your subgraph on the decentralized network. It's super simple, super easy. And once the sunrise is complete, the hosted service will be in the rearview mirror fully. We will have fully upgraded the hosted service to the network, and then it's just the Graph network, which I'm super excited for.
Cool. So you mentioned once it's complete. So basically, what are the challenges that you are facing right now, or the developers are facing, in order to ensure that this is complete?
Yeah, great question. So it takes a lot of engineering resources internally at Edge and Node, and all across the core developer teams. So we're just working to make it a really smooth process. We want it to be super seamless, super easy as an iPhone upgrade. That's what we want when you're upgrading your subgraph to the network.
So it's interesting because this seems like a very efficient system, the use of decentralized data and how it's being applied. But it also seems like this is a very, it's a very Web3 focused use case. But do you see this being applied to like any Web2 use cases at all, where traditional, like, non-decentralized companies can actually use like decentralized data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of traditional companies do query subgraphs that are on the graph because they're public. Any company across the world can access that data. So we've seen a lot of that. We also have seen the telecom company, they are an indexer on the graph network. So you're seeing a lot of these traditional companies spin up indexers to support that ecosystem on the decentralized network. And when it comes to Web2 companies, I think that over time, all of the data will exist in Web3. So we'll kind of move from this Web2 world to Web3. It'll be a very easy transition, just like you Google anything, you can start doing that in Web3 with things like Geo, which is a Web3 browser. So that's kind of my vision for the future, is that we move towards this decentralized world. Everything is in Web3. And I think that all Web2 companies will leverage it in some way.
Now, is that going to involve any sort of cryptocurrency or digital asset, or is this just purely about like decentralized data?
So the graph has a native utility work token called GRT, and you should only ever purchase what you intend to use in the network. It was created to kind of allow for this ecosystem, to incentivize this ecosystem. So indexers stake GRT on the network, And you can also be a delegator. So you can delegate to the indexers that are serving those queries. And then indexers earn GRT through the queries that happen. And so developers and third-party data consumers are paying for GRT every time they use these applications that are on the network.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
It's like so crazy to think that you were in traditional finance and then now you're here, but it just seems like, you know, that this really is solving problems that we're seeing today and with traditional financial companies or just like Web2
Totally.
companies.
Totally. And I think a lot of brilliant minds are thinking about Web3. They're also thinking about AI. I think, from my time in banking, even just looking at the practical nature of it, because these banks grew so quickly, their tech stacks are just kind of thrown together. And so it's almost like a Jenga building block. Things break all the time. And so they're ripe for innovation. And I don't think that the middlemen will go away fully, right? Even in DeFi, you want someone to call you if you're about to get a margin call. So I think that there's an opportunity to actually embrace the tech stack in Web3 and provide services on top of that, similar to what an investment bank would do.
Right. What are your thoughts on, because I think you mentioned AI briefly, but what are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on AI and how it's being applied to the Web3 space? And if
Yeah.
EdgeNode or the Graph is applying AI?
We are, yeah. So we're applying AI. But before I get into that, I think
Okay.
one thing that's really interesting is like the AI kids hate crypto, but they don't have a way to monetize AI, at least not that I've seen. I haven't seen any effective ways to monetize AI. So I think that the two can actually leverage one another because crypto is all about thinking through incentive structures and they can actually leverage that for their businesses. So I'm excited for that. But the graph has been using machine learning for a very long time. A lot of the indexers leverage it today around pricing to get ahead. But also, I met a girl last night at the event at the House of Web3, and she just launched on ChatGPT. They launched their app store. And so she launched an app called Freelance. And so you can search ChatGPT using the graph's data to see different jobs in Web3. And that's all live on the network. So anytime you query ChatGPT with her app, GRT is actually being processed in the background for those queries, which is super exciting. And I think that that's where a lot of the future is going. And Semiotic is a core developer, and they're brilliant minds in AI. They've been working on it for a very long time, and they're working on being able to feed LLMs, the technology behind ChatGPT and other technologies with the subgraph data, which is really rich. And with that, it lowers the barrier to entry of anyone who can use and leverage Web3 data because you can search for it in any language using AI, which is really powerful.
Wow, that is interesting. That's a really good use case. Are there any other use cases that you want to mention in terms of like AI and crypto or Web3 or?
I think one thing that's really an exciting opportunity is just when you have verifiable data using the blockchain and you're able to kind of feed AI with verifiable data, that's when things get really interesting. I think today, if you use ChatGPT, you can make a great argument based on kind of fluff or based on misinformation. So I'm excited to see verifiable data being what feeds the AI.
Right, because right now, I mean, like you said, there can be biases. There can be like somebody can, you know, have a machine learning model or some sort of model that actually has biases just built into it because they created it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big problem with AI. But like you said, if it can be verified using the blockchain or zero knowledge proofs,
Mm-hmm.
then that gives the data, verifiability, which I think that is like the main thing that blockchain can
Help
provide to
with.
the AI
Yeah,
space, which is really cool.
absolutely. Absolutely. And Forbes actually did an article of the top 5 AI and blockchain projects, and they listed the graph as number one, which
Cool.
was super exciting.
Right, because the data is decentralized and it's being pulled in for Chat GPT, which, I guess if it's decentralized, there's less bias because
Mhm.
it's not just coming from one model,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And we've seen that a lot with Google. Like the government will send them takedown requests oftentimes. And so if you have two very powerful entities, one, being the government, one being a large tech company, they really have control of the data, the information, what's indexed. I mean, that's power. So I believe in a world where, I mean, yeah, I guess I believe in a world where data is not manipulated or controlled.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Also, let's talk a little bit about open source because I wrote an article recently where I interviewed you talking about the importance of like open source and
Mhm.
Web3. So, can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen a lot of kind of web 2, maybe web 2.5 companies that will take open source technology and they'll put a paywall on it, and then they'll just create kind of this SaaS like company. And with that, they have all of the power, they have all of the control. They basically own the applications, they own the developers. And I think that that's a really dangerous world. And that's really what we're trying to get away from in Web3. It's all about self sovereignty and empowerment and freedom. And if you're trusting these centralized companies that are kind of masking as Web3, then you're giving your power to them. Just like not your keys, not your crypto, not your subgraph, not your application.
Right. And so, open source, just for those listeners that don't know what that is, that means that like the code can actually be accessed by anybody. Am I explaining that
It's open. Yeah,
correctly? Yeah.
exactly. It's open. So the technology can actually be changed. So you get to kind of vote with your feet in open source, which I think is a very important thing. It also allows for us to leverage the same protocols underneath, where if you think of Web 2, you have a tech stack that's built inside of a centralized company, and that's repeated with every different company. But if you have Web3 and you're using the technology underneath that's open source and free, anyone can leverage that tech stack and just build their services on top, keeping it open, which I think is really exciting and powerful as long as we embrace that. And I think that a lot of the old monetization models are broken because it's all about locking you in. I mean, even if we look at social media today, it's all about locking you in, keeping you on that social media platform for everything that you do so that they can monetize by selling you ads and things like that. So we need to get away from those monetization models. And that's why crypto is so powerful, because it's these new incentive structures.
Definitely. Okay, switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask you about this topic. So, we recently saw the approval of a spot Bitcoin ETF in the United States. And now I'm reading articles and seeing online, when is an Ethereum a spot ETF?
Mm-hmm.
When will that be approved? So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, just in general, like when it may be approved or what you think, what it could do for the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that that's the natural evolution. I think Bitcoin is should be first. Bitcoin is really proven, but Ethereum really should be the next one. So I think that's in sight. But I also think that it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit scary because it is this centralization risk where you want to have self sovereignty, you want people to self custody. But if a lot of these large companies are buying into the ETFs, there's centralization risk there. And so I think we should be very mindful. It is exciting that we're seeing mass adoption, that we're seeing these large companies being able to buy in to Bitcoin, to Ethereum via these ETFs. But I think that if you're involved in the space, you really should self custody as opposed to buying the ETF if possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. Although, it's interesting because from, someone like my parents' perspective, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, I think they're going to find these ETFs to be really valuable. But,
Mm-hmm.
for people like us, it's like I still want to keep my crypto on a ledger. I still want to
Mm-hmm.
custody it. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah,
But it's a good starting point, right? So it's an easy way to enter, but then hopefully once people enter, they understand the value of crypto, which is really at the self custody level. So I'm hopeful for that. But I think with Ethereum, the opportunity is now for anyone who's not, a large institution, to be able to get into Ethereum today before that ETF is approved, so that you can get in advance of a lot of these large companies.
for sure. I do think another benefit of these ETFs being approved in the United States is just the fact that it's like people are starting to become more interested in Web3 and the technology behind
Mm-hmm.
cryptocurrency, which is great for the space because we'll start seeing hopefully just more people using blockchain and wanting
Absolutely.
to use like decentralized data sets.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could really help, drive that
Totally.
adoption.
Yeah, the adoption's happening. More and more people are getting educated about it, and
Exactly.
it has to start somewhere. So I'm
Right.
excited for the ETF to be a lot of people's starting point.
Yeah.
And it legitimizes the industry as well.
Totally. Yeah. So we'll just have to see what happens. But I don't know. Maybe it will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
We'll see.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any predictions. So, because if I'm wrong, then that's
You
that's
never
recorded.
know.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, how long did it take us to get the Bitcoin ETF through? It was a very long
Yeah, it was a
time.
long
So
time. Yeah. So Tegan, I want to touch on this topic a little bit, just briefly. Um, if you have any advice for women wanting to get involved in Web3, because sometimes I go to these events and I have women come up to me and they're like, wow, you're so inspiring. How can I get involved in this space?
Mhm.
Because they think it might be too technical or,
Mhm.
they don't know anything about Web3. So just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, with this paradigm shift, there's a lot of opportunity to change structures. And I think that now is really the time that we need feminine leadership. I think that we've seen what the guys can do. If you look at the kind of recent crash, it was all led by men. And I think now's the opportunity for us as women to come in and help change things. And I think that you actually have a really large opportunity in Web3 and crypto as a woman, because there honestly aren't that many of us. And I think that that allows you to stand out. It allows you to have that opportunity. It's also scary, I think, for a lot of women to enter a male dominated industry, but I would encourage any women listening to take that opportunity. Don't be afraid of it. And, we're creating this new financial system. We need different, diverse voices out there. And so, yeah, my biggest advice is just start learning about it. Listen to podcasts like this one. Laura Shin also has a great podcast. I co-host The Defiant. So there's a lot of resources out there where you can start learning about the different projects in the industry, but then also go to events. There's local events, like we're here in San Francisco. There's events at the House of Web3 every single week, but that's not just San Francisco. Almost every city around the world, you were in Austin, there's events in Miami, New York. So everywhere has local events. And if there's not a local event, you could even think about starting one yourself. And that's a really great way to meet people. So just go to events, start talking to people. ETH Denver's coming up. That's a great place
Are
to
you
kind of
going to be at
come.
ETH Denver?
I'm not going
Okay,
this
I'm
year.
not either.
Okay,
So
okay. It's my first ETH Denver that
yeah,
I'm missing,
yeah,
but that's a really great
it
opportunity.
is.
There's so many people that go, so many new people. So just come, ask questions, don't be afraid.
Yeah. No, I like that. Getting out there and networking, and that's been important for me as a journalist in this industry, because that's how people like put a face to the writing that I
Mm-hmm.
produce.
Yep, totally. It's important.
It is really important. And like people are very friendly, they're open. And I think one of the best things about Web3 is that it's innovative. You can literally start your own thing and grow it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like in traditional, Web2 or traditional finance where it's like I feel like everything is so structured
There's
and
so much
centralized.
process. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You can, I mean, yeah, you can start anything. You can start writing a blog, just start speaking and start learning, and don't be afraid to, yeah, to dive in.
Yeah. So one question I wanted to ask, and I forgot to ask you when we were talking about the decentralized data and the graph, where
Hmm.
is this data stored?
Yeah, so the different indexers store it in different places. So you can actually like prune data, you can have unpruned data. So with the graph, we have time travel queries, which go all the way back. So for example, different blockchains are easier to index. Ethereum can be indexed in a matter of a few hours, whereas Solana, because it's a larger chain, there's more data, it takes a lot longer to index that chain. And so the indexers can store it anywhere.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Okay, so the indexers are the ones storing that data. Okay, that makes
exactly.
sense.
So the data lives on the blockchain, but that organized data, they're storing that. And because there are so many different indexers, it's kind of decentralized.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
So Tegan, what's next? Like, what are you excited about? What's next for the graph? What's next for Edge and Node?
Yeah, so I'm really excited for the sunrise. I'm really excited to see kind of all of the subgraphs upgrade to the decentralized network, to see query fees flow on the network. There's inflation rewards that the indexers can earn, and I'm excited for GRT query fees to kind of flip those inflation rewards. And then the foundation launched the roadmap with the new era of the graph. And so we're expanding. When we first started the graph, there weren't that many data needs. But now that Web3 has really exploded and we see all these different use cases, there are so many different data needs, including SQL, AI. So we're expanding to many different data streams beyond just subgraphs today. And then Graph Horizon, I'm really excited about because it furthers censorship resistance in the graph, and it also simplifies a lot of different things. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Cool. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of upcoming great things.
Wait, I
Go
should
ahead.
say on the indexer question. So the indexers can store the data in a Postgres database. That's usually where they store it.
Okay. Wait, what is that called again?
Postgres database.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. That's a
Mm-hmm.
new one for me.
I know. I just remembered.
I
So.
should look into that. It could be, are there like a lot of these, or is it like just one?
Yeah. So each
Okay.
indexer kind of has their own and they can store it. Yeah.
Okay. Got
However
it.
they
Okay. I'm going
choose.
to
They
look into
have the
that.
freedom. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay, cool. Tegan, so before we end the interview, is there anything that you want to mention that I didn't already ask you about?
I don't think so. No, I'm just really excited for the space. I know modular blockchains have been a really popular term. I'm really excited about the work Celestia is doing. I think, you have these monolithic blockchains like Solana as an example, where it's kind of one giant Lego building block or like one giant castle of Legos. But what the modular space is doing is breaking that into different pieces so that developers have more freedom to choose what pieces they want. So for example, Celestia is at the data availability layer. Ethereum's coming out with their own data availability layer and then EigenLayer also, but Celestia is the first data availability layer to launch. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the innovation that comes with that modularity. So yeah, that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to, and kind of the industry and the ecosystem, and the graph is there to support the rollups that launch on Celestia and all the pieces.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new because I didn't know anything about modular blockchains or the term that you said before that. And that just goes to show, like, I've been in the industry since 2017 and I'm still learning, and there are still things that I don't know about. But, talking to people like you, it's really exciting to hear about that and to take these new things that are happening and to educate the world about them because the space is growing.
Totally. I know it's so hard to keep up with. I used to go to every single crypto event, and now my team kind of goes to these events, but it's hard to keep your finger on the pulse because the innovation happens so quickly. So much is happening. DApp chains are the new biggest thing. So that almost, there's new applications that are so large, they need their own chain. So there's a lot to keep up with in the industry, but it's really exciting. And it's nice to kind of be at that forefront of innovation where everything's happening. So I encourage anyone listening to get involved. Don't be afraid of the space. And there's a lot of misconceptions. I think there's a lot of different paths you can take in crypto and Web3. And so find what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about finance, if you're passionate about art, gaming, there are different communities and ecosystems within Web3. It's such a diverse group. So you can really kind of deep dive into different areas.
Definitely. One thing I want to add before we end this interview, and I could probably talk to you all day, but you mentioned about art. So what are your thoughts? Do you think NFTs are actually making a comeback? Because now I'm seeing a lot of things about like NFTs are not dead. And like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think anything in crypto really ever does die. It definitely goes through cycles. It's cyclical. I'm excited. I think, I bought a CryptoPunk at the height of the bull market or the NFT market. And that community has definitely evolved and changed a lot. But I view the CryptoPunks as kind of like the Bitcoin of the NFT space. Yeah. And so, I'll never sell my punk. I'm always keeping my punk. I think NFTs, yes, will definitely kind of revive.
Awesome. Okay. Mm-hmm. Tegan, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm the Kline Venture. And then also my website, tegankline.com. I'm also on TikTok at the Kline Venture as well. So I like to kind of educate. I was one of the first Web3 creators on TikTok. And now there's so many different creators that are teaching about the true value behind Web3 and like the community behind it. So it's nice that it's not just speculation.
Right. And if anybody wants to work at the House of Web3 or join the events here, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get in touch with the team. The House of Web3 has a Twitter. There's also a website. If you go to edgeandnode.com, you can find the House of Web3 and you can apply to be a co-creator. There is an interview process, but we welcome really anyone who is passionate about the Web3 space and adding value to the ecosystem.
Awesome. Tegan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Special thanks to Aaron Bender for producing Web3 Deep Dive podcast. I'd also like to thank the sponsors behind Web3 Deep Dive. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. I'll see you guys next time.